Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can make a mould for a pendant that doesn't require any drilling when you take it out. So that sounds sneaky. It is sneaky. I've thought of a really sneaky way of doing it, and so I'm going to show you how I make my mould so that I can take this pendant out of the mould and I won't need to drill a hole. And I think that's brilliant news because I don't like drilling the holes in them just in case I slip and ruin it. So that's what today's video will be about. Stay tuned and enjoy. Your first job when you're making a mould is to make your barrier. But before you can make the barrier, I suppose the first job actually is to arrange your pieces into the position you want them to appear in the mould. And I just leave a little bit of space in between each piece because I don't like to use too much silicone. It's quite expensive and you don't want to waste it. So the smaller you can make your mould and the closer you can put your pieces together, the better. Not too close together because it'll be too weak. You need the strength and the sturdiness of the gap between each piece to make sure it keeps its shape when you're doing your moulding of your resin or whatever you want to mould later on. So yeah, I'm kind of contradicting myself. You don't want it too small and you don't want it too big, that space in between each piece. So if you look at how I've arranged it, that's how I've decided to have mine. So once I had them arranged, I could make my barrier, and I've made it out of plexiglass. Plexiglass works really well because it's nice and sturdy, it's easy to cut with a scalpel, and it just works perfectly. But if you don't have any plexiglass or perspex or acrylic or anything like that, don't worry, you can use cardboard and just cover it in tape so that it doesn't stick to the mould. Now then, this next step is the most important part of making your mould, and trust me, I've learned the hard way. If you don't stick your pieces down onto something really sticky, the silicone mould making solution that you pour on will seep underneath, and then you'll have to cut it away from the top when you've finished and you won't have a nice clean edge. This is the second time I've done this with this mould and the second time I've filmed it, because the first time the stuff that I used just wasn't sticky enough, and so I've started all over again so that I can show you it working correctly. And I'm just using aluminium tape, and it's a bit fiddly. I've just peeled the paper back and I'm just trying to position the pieces onto there. And the reason I haven't connected it down to my tile on the background yet, I'm just working on a tile. You can work on anything you like, but I'm using a tile. The reason I haven't stuck it down yet is because I need to be able to turn it over and really rub the back to make sure it's really stuck really well and there's no little gaps. And it is time consuming to do it this way, but you will thank me for it, because then you won't end up having to start all over again like I did. So also what I'm doing is I'm trying to align the pendant pieces so that the holes are all in kind of a straight line, because I'm going to be threading some wire through it soon, and then it's going to be hard if they're not all in a straight line. So yeah, that's what I'm doing there. Now I'm going to turn it over and give it a really good rub on the back to make sure it's all really stuck nicely. And it will crinkle up the foil tape a bit, but it doesn't really matter. I don't mind if the top of my mould is a little bit wrinkly looking. That doesn't bother me, as long as we've got a nice clean edge where it gets to the edge of the cavity after it's moulded. I've just used a silicone sheet underneath just in case. I didn't want the tape sticking to the tile while I was doing this part, so I thought if I've got something I can pick up and peel off, it'll be easier. That's the only reason I've put that blue sheet there. So yeah, giving it a good rub. And you'll see I haven't got the earrings on there yet, and that's because I wanted to check the position of them a little bit more carefully against the barrier, because I've drilled holes in the barrier for the wire to go through, and I've already done that at this stage of filming, and so I needed to check that it all lines up correctly. So that's why I haven't quite got as far as putting the earrings on yet. Okay, so now I'm going to line up the wire with the hole in my earring pendant. I keep calling them pendants. I don't really know if that's the right word, but you know what I mean, don't you? So yeah, I've stuck the wire through the little hole that I've already drilled, and I'm threading it through the bead or pendant and checking which position I need to have that bead in. I did actually move it a little bit again later on because for some reason I didn't quite get it right. But hey ho, I got there in the end. So yeah, there's 2 holes at the front for those earrings, and there's 2 holes at the side. There's a hole at each side for the other wire, and you'll see it might sound complicated, but it's really not. You'll see as I go along what I'm doing. And I keep wiping them because this silicone that I'm going to be using in a couple of minutes is really, 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 really good, and it picks up any little mark. That's the only problem with it. So I'm quite conscientiously rubbing away and polishing away any marks that might have appeared on it in the process of what I'm doing all the time. And again, you can see me there really making sure it's stuck down to the tape. Right, now we need a sticky surface to put that down onto so that I can press it down and make sure it stays into shape, because that piece of tape I was working with just before is now very wrinkly, and I want to smooth it down a bit and have something for it to stick down to on my tile. So I'm just sticking the tape, some more tape down with some sellotape, sticky side up. It's just the aluminium tape again. If you've watched any of my other videos, I use this stuff all the time. It's so good. And I'm going to just do 2 of those pieces and then put my other piece on top. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward this part a little bit because it's quite time consuming what I'm doing next, but it's quite important too. And what I'm going to do after I've finished just polishing those up again is rub it all down so it's nice and flat as I can get it. And I tried all different tools to get into all the nooks and crannies. Use whatever you've got, your fingers, lolly sticks, anything you like, just to get it nice and smooth. Right, now I'm threading some wire through the holes. I'm going to need to use some pliers as well to thread it through because it was a bit fiddly to get it threaded through. But yeah, it's just jewellery wire and threading it through, and that's going to go through both sides of the barrier as well, ready for pouring in the moulding solution. You're probably wondering why I didn't thread it before I stuck the pieces down. That would be a really good idea, but I didn't really want to do it like that because I felt that I wouldn't have been able to get right up to the edges when I was rubbing everything down, and I just wanted to be really sure that I got a really good adhesion to that I can't speak today, the aluminium tape. So I decided to thread it afterwards, but you could, if you wanted to, thread it before. It's your choice. I'm going to trim the wire before I put the barrier on, so I'm just marking it so I know where to cut it, and it will just make it a lot easier to thread through the holes in the barrier. Right at this stage, I found that it was all a little bit too tight at the bottom, so it wasn't really a problem because the plexiglass that I've used is quite flexible. And so I've bent it and I'm holding it in place while I'm using hot glue around the edge. And that's what I was going to do anyway. I was going to seal all the edges with hot glue, but I'm just holding that into a little bit of a bent position just to make a bit more space near those earring beads that I've done. Funnily enough, I actually did end up moving those beads. They just weren't quite right in the right position, those two earrings. So I didn't need to do this bit, but that's hindsight for you. Okay, so I'm just taking two smaller pieces of wire now, and I'm just going to thread them through the front of that barrier where I've made two holes in the right position, and it's just going to go through the little earrings right through so it's poking out the other side. And the reason I'm actually doing all this with the wire, because it might seem a bit strange to you, the reason I'm doing it is because I want a hole going all the way through my silicone mould when it's finished. And you'll see why when I use the silicone mould in the next part to make my necklace. Right, now everything's in position. That's the hardest part over with. And I'm just sealing all the way around the edges with my hot glue gun, and I'm putting loads and loads and loads on because this mould making solution that I'm going to be using is fantastic, but it's really thin when you pour it, and it will find the smallest hole and it will leak out. So I'm putting loads and loads and loads of hot glue around the edges. Okay, it's all glued up and sealed and ready to go. I've mixed my mould making solution, which I will put a link to in the description, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio, this one, and I think I did, I can't remember the measurements, but you can see how much I've got there. I think it was 40 grams of each part, so it's 2 equal parts, and you really need to mix it for about 5 minutes so you know it's really completely mixed together. And then you just pour it on, and it's great stuff because you don't need to use anything to get rid of the bubbles. They just all come out all by themselves. Although I do like to, once I've poured all the solution in, I do need to like to give it a good shake and bang the tile about a little bit, just in case there's any pockets of air that have been trapped, because you don't want any big bubbles in there. But other than that, it's great. All the little bubbles come out by themselves. Oh, another really important thing is make sure your surface is level. Whatever surface you're working on, get your spirit level on it and make sure it's completely level. As I've already mentioned, I'm using a big tile so that I can pick it up and move it and prop it up if it's not level and whatnot. It's really good to move it, to bang it about to get rid of the air bubbles. So it's always good to do your mould making on something that you can move. So once it's poured in, I'm just giving it a good bash around. As you can see, I'm kind of lifting the tile up a bit and just dropping it, and then any air bubbles just escape. And then it needs leaving. This particular solution needs leaving for about 12 hours, it says on the bottle. It was actually it felt ready after about 2 or 3 hours, and I was so tempted to remove it, but I thought, no, I don't want this one to go wrong. I'll leave it. And I actually left it until the next day, so it actually had almost 24 hours, but it says 12 hours on the bottle, and that is absolutely fine. Right, it's time to dismantle it, and I didn't really have any specific way of doing it. Just go for it, rip it all off the surface, and just any old way is the way I did it, as you'll see. Yeah, just, it's so strong, you can just pull away at all the bits and just keep pulling everything off it until it's done. And yeah, Are you impressed with my technical description? Yeah, me too. So there we go. All peeled off, and it actually came out really nice because I'd taken so much time to make sure they were really stuck to that sticky tape at the beginning. And it was a pain in the neck to to spend so much time on that, but it was worth it. And I've just pulled out the wire and it came out really easily. And there we have it. And the original beads come out so nicely. There are some little bits there that you'll see where the silicone seeped into the holes of the beads, and all you need to do is just trim them off. Grab them with the tweezers or with your fingers and get a little knife and carefully just pull and cut, and they'll come off really easy. And then it's ready for the resin. I was actually one step ahead of myself there, saying we're ready for the resin. We're almost ready for the resin, because this is the next step, which is the bit that stops you from having to drill any holes. This is what this whole thing has been about, and the reason why I wanted a hole going all the way through the mould. And I'm going to thread some strimmer wire through it. And the reason I'm using strimmer wire is because it's made out of nylon. And I did my research to find out exactly which materials resin won't stick to, and nylon is one of them. So I went on to Google again to see what I could use that is made of nylon, and I discovered that some kinds of strimmer wire, for cutting your grass, some of them are made of nylon. So I got some nylon. I wanted to go to my shed and get my strimmer and take some out of the strimmer, but I thought, no, I'm not an expert on these things, and I want to order one that says it's made of nylon. So that's what I did. And here I am, just threading it through the holes, and I'm using some pliers to just help me to thread it through. It's little bit fiddly, but it's so worth it doing it this way, I think. It's worth the fiddly part now, because if you can imagine drilling holes through all those beads, and if you drill in a hole and they all work really well, and then you get to your last bead and your drill slips and you mess it up, well, yeah, it's hard to explain what my reaction would be without swearing, so I'm not going to tell you what my reaction would be. I much prefer this method. So all that strimmer wire is in, and I just need to put a little bit in for the 2 earrings, and then we're ready for the resin. I noticed that my mould wasn't sitting flat on the surface, and I thought it was because I had the wire too tight, and I kept fiddling with the strimmer wire, and then looked on the back of it and realised that it had raised edges on the back. So I've just trimmed the back of the mould, and now it's sitting flat. And there we are. The wire for the earrings was in really easy, just all the way through to that other hole, and it's ready. Okay, now it's time for the fun part. I've mixed my epoxy resin. It's TotalCast epoxy resin. And give it a good thorough mix. Always make sure you mix it for at least 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm just half filling each cavity with clear resin. And then I'm going to be adding some abalone shell flakes, which are my absolute favourite thing. I just love them, and I will also put a link to those in the description. So I'm going to add the flakes. I'm going to speed this all up. As you can see, it's already sped up, and yeah, I'm going to add these all one at a time really carefully and position them how I want them. So it did take a while, that's why I've sped it up. And when I've done that, and I've given it time to cure a little bit, it doesn't need to be fully cured. I'm going to leave it a couple of hours. When I've done that, I will put another coat of resin on the top and completely fill each cavity up with the coloured resin which I'm going to use. I didn't want the coloured resin to merge with the clear resin because it would have covered up the shell pieces. I want to be able to see them really clearly, so that's why I'm doing it in 2 parts. And like I say, I'm absolutely in love with these abalone shells, and you can get them from eBay or Amazon. You can get them on Wish. And when we started with the lockdown, I really needed some for a project I was doing, and I couldn't get any anywhere. So I ordered some on Wish and forgot I'd ordered them, and then ordered some again. And I did the same on Amazon. And then recently, when the restrictions were not so bad and the postage improved, I started getting all these parcels through my door of the abalone shells which I'd forgotten I'd ordered. So I've now got loads. So I'm going now I've got the mould as well. I'm going to make lots of sets of these necklaces and earrings because I love them. Right, so sticking to my tradition of forgetting to click record, I did the same again, and I've missed out quite an important bit, which was pouring the resin in, but I suppose it's not that important. It's quite straightforward. The colour I've used is rose gold, and I think it's a really pretty colour. The other one I've made previously was black, and black works really well as well with behind those shells, and you'll see that soon. But yeah, I've used rose gold and just got rid of the bubbles very carefully with my torch. I only gave it a really quick blast with my torch because I like to be careful with my mould. And you can see now I'm just giving it a little bit of a scrape with my long coffee stirrer stick thing. And that was just because I felt like I'd overfilled it a little bit. It's sometimes hard to tell, especially because I now wear one of these big full respirator masks, and I can't wear my glasses with it, and it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing. So yeah, I couldn't quite see, so I scraped it with the stick just to make sure I've got it quite level, and made quite a mess, but it doesn't matter. Right, so it's the next day and my resin's cured, and as you can see I've just pulled out the wire. It's quite hard to pull out if I'm honest, and so what I did was I clamped it down with something just heavy and flat on top. I clamped it down and then pulled the wire out. You don't have to, you could manage without doing that, but it does make it a lot easier. And use pliers as well, you can get a much better grip of it. And here we are demoulding them, the most exciting bit. And I really do love how they've turned out. And you can't go wrong with those abalone flakes because they're so beautiful and shiny, and they've got their own natural patterns in there. I really don't think you could go wrong. Whatever you do with your resin or whatever colours you choose is going to look good. And really, there's a whole world of possibilities of things you can do in these beads. You could do an ocean scene with some sand at the bottom and your sea foam and your waves. You could put beads in. You could put all kinds of different things in there. Just use your imagination and see what you come up with. It's so satisfying using these moulds. And of course, you might not have a necklace like mine to make a mould from, but go to your charity shops and you'll be amazed what you can find in the jewellery section to make moulds from. And I'm sure you'll find something similar. And if not, you could make some of your own pieces with polymer clay and do it that way. You'll have just seen that most of those little bits that were sticking out just wiped off with my fingers, and then I just used an emery board just to smooth the edges a little bit. And now what I like to do on the back, you find that there's a little bit of a raised edge just all around the edge. It'll be a little bit raised, and that always happens when you're pouring resin into a mould. So what I like to do is get a little bit of UV resin which I've done there, and just smooth it on. If you don't have UV resin, you could use your usual resin that you use. It just takes you've got to wait for it to cure then. With UV resin, you can just put it under a lamp, and I like to leave it for about 10 minutes when it's something like this to make sure it's completely cured. And it just finishes it off nicely, because you don't want the recipient of the necklace to have anything that feels sharp or itchy against the skin. So that's what I'm doing here, just filling it up a little bit at the back, just giving it a really thin coat with UV resin. And then, as I said, just put it under the UV lamp for 10 minutes and it's done, all ready to make your jewellery out of. And so here we have my finished pieces after I put them all together. I didn't show you the part of threading all the beads and all of that because, I'm not really a jewellery expert, and I would have probably, although it works for me, probably not shown you the right technique. I've just got my own techniques. But yeah, one day I might do a jewellery tutorial showing you how I put it all together, but not for this one. So yeah, it looks lovely in the black, doesn't it? And do you like my boxes that I've made? If you like those boxes and you would like to join me on my new Patreon account, you are welcome to come and support me on there. And if you become a full member, you will get a template for these boxes, and you will also see a video on there, because I'll be having videos on there which you don't see on my usual YouTube account. So I need to give something extra to those people that are supporting me on Patreon. So there will be another video on there to show how I made the boxes and the downloadable template for you. And I also have my own website now. Since I last spoke to you on here, a lot's happened. I've been really poorly, but I've also managed to finish building my website, so I can sell these on my website now. So there'll be a link in my description for this video for my Patreon page and for my website, as well as all the materials that I've used. I'll give you links for those as well. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you like the end result of these beautiful earrings and the necklaces. I just love them to bits. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do so, and then you'll get a notification next time I upload a video. Bye for now.